Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm preaching through the book of Revelation. Okay, it is a long book, and there are many details there, and many people find it confusing, many people find it controversial. It is difficult to preach. So anyway, I'm making the attempt to preach it through. I don't think I can finish the book of Revelation by the end of this year. It depends on how I want to stretch it. Stretch not as in intentionally stretching it, but how much I want to communicate across. And I think we have a pretty mature group of people here in our midst, and therefore I think we can go deeper. Anyway, I've been telling people that in our church, we don't just give out milk. If you are new believers, okay, we give you milk, especially at the community group levels. But on the Sunday pulpit, we dish out both milk and meat, right? So far we have covered the first 3 chapters in 9 sermons. Today we are going on to the 4th chapter, chapter 4 of the book of Revelation. Now, chapter 4 marks the new beginning of a new and major section in the book of Revelation. If you remember what Jesus says in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 19, it says, "Write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this." Now, Revelation chapter 1 covers the things that you have seen, which are the things that John saw in his first vision. It is the revelation of the risen and glorified Christ. Those that are refers to the things that were happening at a time when John received the vision. That is, the different conditions of the churches at that time. Now, these are detailed in the 7 letters that Jesus wrote to the 7 churches in Asia Minor. Now, those that are to take place after this refers to the future events that will happen in the last 7 years of this present age and beyond. Okay, chapter 4 onwards gives us the details of the future events of tribulation, millennium, and eternity. Okay, let's read verse 1 of chapter 4. "After this, I, John, looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice, which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet, say, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this.'" What must take place after this? Now, many Christians nowadays look at the book of Revelation claiming that it is confusing and controversial. However, it was a great encouragement to the saints during in John's days. They suffered intense persecution. Many of them were martyred for their faith. They were desperate. The letter of Revelation. Remember in my first sermon, I say that the book of Revelation is a letter that God instructed John to write to the 7 churches. So the letter of Revelation was a big encouragement to these persecuted saints. It inspired them to press on in their faith and in their allegiance to Christ and not to give up. It gave them hope by revealing to them God's future plan to defeat and conquer evil. They might not understand the letter in its entirety, but they were assured that Jesus was in control, and ultimately he would win and they would join him in his victory. Now, this same passage of hope is also for us in the Omega generation. Okay, when I say Omega generation, I mean the last generation. The generation that will see the rapture, the generation where after the rapture will begin to witness the tribulation. We anticipate dark and dystopian times ahead as we approach the time, the end of this present age. But ultimately, Jesus wins and we will share in his victory. Okay, that is important for us to cling on to. Ultimately, Jesus wins and we will share in that victory. Someday, we will rule and reign together with him in that 1,000 years. And I believe, although the Bible didn't say, throughout eternity, we will reign, we will rule together with him. Okay, so let's take a look at the text for today, chapter 4. We're going to read all the 11 verses. After this, I, John, look, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet say, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning, and rumblings and peals of thunder. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass, like crystal. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature with the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and within. And day and night they never cease to say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and who is to come. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you have created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. Now, no future events were foretold in chapter 4 of Revelation. Instead, we are shown the throne room of God. No future events are revealed in chapter 4. Instead, we are shown the throne room of God. We catch a glimpse of not just heaven, but the throne room of God. This is the most holy place. This is the holy of holies in heaven. Now I say that because if you remember in the tabernacle and in the Solomon's temple, there is that holy place, and in it was placed the Ark of Covenant. What was on the mercy seat on top of the Ark of Covenant? The cherubim. All right, you have the throne of God, you have the cherubim. So those were copies, those were shadows of things to come. So here John get a glimpse of the throne room in heaven, that inner sanctum of God's abode. Now, rarely does anyone get to see heaven, much more so the throne room of God. John is among the select few, which include the prophets Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. These men were given the privilege. Now Paul was caught up into the third heavens, but he was not permitted to say or to write anything. He was not permitted to reveal whatever he saw. However, for the Apostle John, God asked him to write down everything he hears and sees, or almost everything. There were certain things he was not permitted to write, but there were many things. Most of the things he was instructed to write them down. And that's why we have the book of Revelation. Let's read Revelation chapter 4, verse 1 again. After this, I look, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, say, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Now the phrase "after this" is used to mark the beginning of a new vision. Okay, important for you to know. The phrase "after this" is used to mark the beginning of a new vision. This phrase is used 6 times altogether in the book of Revelation, meaning to say that what you read in the book of Revelation is not one continuous vision. Okay, John didn't see one continuous vision from the beginning, okay, chapter 1 all the way to the end in chapter 22. Instead, it is broken up into at least 6 different visions. But all these visions are connected. Okay, all these visions are connected. One follows another, and the events are laid out in a chronological order. Yes, you hear me correctly. Different people have different opinions, different views, but I believe that the events in the book of Revelation are laid out in a chronological order. That means sequentially. One happens after another. Okay, I know there are people who look at the 3 different series of judgment, the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls judgment, and they say that these are repetitive. Meaning to say that these are different perspectives of the same series of judgment. Now, I don't see it that way. Okay, because in many ways, as you look at the book of Revelation, you realize that things move sequentially. Things move chronologically. One thing after another. From the beginning of the tribulation until the end of the tribulation, and then moving beyond into the millennium, and then after that moving beyond, a short glimpse into eternity. What will happen in eternity? Okay, what is our destiny in eternity? So in this first occurrence, the phrase "after this" refers to after the first vision. When John saw the glorified Christ and the 7 letters to the 7 churches, those were seen in the first vision. Following that, John saw the second vision. We have no idea of the time interval between the 2 visions, whether it is momentarily afterwards or immediately afterwards, or a few hours later, or a few days later, or a few weeks later. Okay, we are not told about that. But all these visions, like I say, one is joined to another. They are all connected in a chronological manner. In this second vision, John saw a door standing in the heaven. A door standing in the heaven. Now, this door is a portal. It's an interdimensional portal, opening up the spiritual dimension, opening up the 3-dimensional physical world to the spiritual realm. It's like when you walk through the door, you move from the 3-dimensional natural physical world into the spiritual realm. Okay, I don't know how many dimensions is that. Some say it's in the past. Years ago, they say it's a 4th dimension. Some say it's a 5th dimension. Today, because of the advancement in physics, they tell you that it's an 11th dimension. It's all too complex for me. But we know that God lives beyond the 3 dimension. God is spirit. God is supernatural. And this door brings a person, brings John from the earthly realm to the heavenly realm. Now, this is like Jacob's ladder. You remember Jacob's dream, where he dreamed of a ladder where angels were descending and ascending on the ladder. The base of the ladder is set on the earth, and then the top of the ladder reaches into the heavens. And angels were moving up and down the ladder, moving between the 2 realms. So the door is a portal. It's an interdimensional portal. Now, John heard a voice calling him to go up, and he recognized that to be the voice of Jesus Christ. He has heard the voice before. It sounds like trumpet. He heard it in the first vision. So that So Jesus get him to go up. So Jesus invited John up to heaven for a purpose, to give him a revelation of future events, to give him a revelation of what must take place at the end of this present age and beyond. Jesus knows exactly how things are going to end. He knows the end from the beginning. God declared this through the prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah 46, verses 9 and 10, I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Now, God not only knows what is going to happen in the future, He planned everything. He planned everything. Nothing is left to chance as far as God is concerned. No one and nothing can stop Him from accomplishing His purpose. He's sovereignly in control, and you can be sure that His plan will unfold accordingly in His time. And what God has decreed for the end, as written in the book of Revelation, as revealed to the prophet Daniel, to Zacharias, and a few other prophets, will come to pass just as He has revealed in the Holy Scripture. Everything that He writes there will come to pass. So I want you to understand something that Isaiah says here, and we know, most of us know, that God doesn't just know the future. He is not predicting the future. God is not doing that. Okay? He has the power to do that. However, the important thing is that God is the one that planned the future. Okay? It's a mystery how the sovereign will of God interact with our human will. God gives us a will to choose and decide. Okay? Yet at the same time, the interaction between God's sovereign will and our will be moved in such a way that at the end, everything that He has decreed, at the end, everything that He has purposed will come to pass. Will come to pass. Now, many prophecies about the end times are coming to pass before our eyes. Okay, many prophecies that are about the end times are coming to pass before our eyes. Things are shaping up very quickly in such a way as the Bible has predicted. Yet, many Christians cannot be bothered. Perhaps they are too busy with their career, family, or even their leisure. Perhaps they just cannot see. They cannot perceive. Is it because of ignorance, indifference, or deception? Even when certain events or things are pointed out to them, they refuse to believe. They cannot accept it. For example, it has become very clear that the world is quickly moving towards totalitarianism, with increasing level of surveillance and control and censorship of news and information. The global elites and the global institutions are openly pushing for a great reset, for a new world order, and some form of a global government. Now, these are things that they say themselves, and these are things that have been pushed out into the open very clearly, especially in the last 2 years. Openly and clearly. Now, just 1 to 2 weeks ago, the World Health Organization attempted the biggest power grab at the global level in human history. The World Health Organization wanted national governments to give up their sovereignty and cede control of health-related decisions to it when a pandemic breaks out in their countries. The problem is the World Health Organization gets to determine when a situation becomes a pandemic. They will decide whether this is a pandemic or not. Okay, this is something that is very, very dangerous. To me, it is a big power grab. Never before have things happened at such a global level. Thankfully, it failed in its attempt, as certain countries and most African nations objected to this global pandemic treaty. Now, this is a big deal, but it's not really reported in the mainstream media. Okay, but it is something that is happening. A lot of people knows. It is all over the social media, and it is really happening. Even in some of the conservative mainstream media in the US, they openly talk about it. Even the US senators, okay, I know for a fact that 2 US senators, they were very prominent. They came out to talk about it, okay, and they say that this is a power grab. It is something that is really happening. These are real developments. My dear brothers and sisters, these are real developments. Yet when pointed out to them, many Christians simply brush them away as silly conspiracy theories. Questions: why do so many Christians fail to discern these developments? Don't the books of Daniel and Revelation clearly indicate that an end-time empire comprising of 10 kings will emerge to form a one-world government, and from this unholy alliance, the Antichrist will rise? Doesn't biblical eschatology inform us that the Antichrist and a one-world government will exert totalitarian control over much, not all, over much of the world, primarily through the international financial system? Okay, consider what the Bible says about the 666 beast system, all right? I think, and why is it that so many Christians cannot discern all these diabolical developments happening before our eyes? To me, it is blatant, it is clear, it is in your face. Yet, most Christians and Christian leaders fail to see these things happening. Why? I think the answer is very simple. I mean, we can talk for hours as to why that perception, why that discernment is not there. But I think the answer is very, very simple. Besides ignorance of the Bible concerning eschatology, these Christians don't possess a biblical mindset. They don't have a biblical perspective. In the context of Revelation chapter 4 verse 1, and that's why I'm talking about all this. In the context of Revelation chapter 4 verse 1, they don't have a heavenly perspective. God has to call John, come up here. Go through that door. Okay? Go through the interdimensional door. Come up here and I will show you what is going to happen from God's perspective, not from the worldly perspective. Like the Apostle John, we need to have a heavenly perspective of things. We cannot be looking at things and considering them from an under the sun perspective. In the words of the preacher in Ecclesiastes, under the sun. You read the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon was grumbling, complaining, and saying a lot of wise things, at the same time a lot of nonsense, foolish things there, because he was looking at things from under the sun. We cannot afford to have an under the sun perspective. It must be the above the sun. It must be heavenly perspective. We need to be heavenly minded. The people of God need to be heavenly minded, especially where we are right now. We are near the end of this present age. We are coming to the place where the rapture is going to take place soon. Like I say, I don't know how soon, but I can tell you I see all this development. All I can say is that it is soon. And then when I see how things are accelerating, how they are coming out in full force, talking about it, in the World Economic Forum that has just finished, the conference that has just finished, in the World Government Summit that finished, completed just about a month or two ago, they are telling you exactly their plans. Some form of global government, some form of control. Okay, scary control, digital control, surveillance, everything. They're telling you, of course they put it in a very nice way. We have to discern the intention. We have to discern the motives. So may God help us. May God have mercy on us. May God lift us up into the heavenlies so that we'll look at things from the heavenly perspective, from God's perspective. Now, if you read, there are many secular books on ancient Israel. If you look at the secular history, they will tell you one king after another, Israel's king, Judah's king, and the prosperity, and why those kingdoms at different seasons of time fail and so on. They'll give you various reasons, economic reasons, military reasons, political reasons. But when you read the Bible, you read Kings and Chronicles, you realize that they don't give you all this. God doesn't give you all this reason. God talks about their obedience. God talks about morality. God talks about things that the secular world don't really look at. God's vantage point is very different from the secular perspective. And we need to have the heavenly perspective. Now, having said that, I want to caution also those who discern these things, but you have become so caught up with so many conspiratorial development. These are real development. Okay? It's good that you keep in touch. But some of us get so caught up that you no longer refer back to the Bible. You no longer refer back to the Bible. Your attention is no longer on the word of God. Your attention is on all these things that are happening. Okay? Don't get me wrong. It is understand that you are clued in. But always remember, your attention must be on the word of God. The danger is you might swing to the other extreme. When that happens, you lose credibility. You lose credibility in your weakness. And I see that happening to people who discern the seasons and discern what is happening. The things you say, how you said it, okay? It comes across in a way that is not really helpful. So we must be very, very careful about that. Understand this. Those of you who are discerning these things that are happening, God has raised you as watchmen in this hour to warn our fellow brothers and sisters and even non-believers that are not aware of what is happening and that things are coming to an end. So be careful. Don't lose your weakness. Don't lose your weakness. Always go back to the Bible. Always anchor your assessment on the Word of God. And apply common sense. Apply common sense, okay? That is important as well. Having discernment is important. But you also need wisdom. You need to discern correctly, but without wisdom, you might end up saying, believing, saying, and doing foolish things. It is not helpful. Okay, we got to hold things in a balance. We discernment and wisdom are two very different things. Okay, discernment means you pick up things very, very quickly. All right? It can be due to your knowledge. It can also be a spiritual discernment when God just trigger that warning in you and cause you to discern, to see, to perceive certain things. But wisdom is after you have discerned, what do you do? Okay? How do you manage the information? How do you communicate? That is important. I want to make another comment on verse 1 of today's text. Some Bible scholars and teachers believe that the catching up of John into heaven is symbolic of the rapture of the church. Now, if that is the case, then it speaks or it points to pre-tribulation rapture. Why? Because at this juncture in chapter 4, the tribulation has not begun or has not happened yet. The tribulation begins 2 chapters later in Revelation chapter 6, when the first seal is opened and the first horseman is unleashed. By itself, the argument is quite simplistic and flimsy. I acknowledge that. I'm a pre-trib guy, but I'll tell you that by itself, okay, this argument is simplistic and flimsy. However, if you were to consider the fact that the church is not mentioned or even alluded to at all from chapter 6 all the way to chapter 18, which describes the events of the tribulation, then it begins to make sense. By itself, it is simplistic, but you begin to look what is said after that. From chapter 6 to 18, the church is not mentioned at all. From chapter 6 to 18, nothing about the church is mentioned. Then the whole thing begins to make sense. Before that, in chapters 1 to 3, the focus is on the church. The church is mentioned many times. All right? Chapter 2 and 3, what is it all about? Jesus' letters to the 7 churches. And then suddenly from chapter 4, the scene in heaven, from then on, the church is not mentioned at all. The church comes back into the picture in chapter 19, when it appears as the bride of Christ in the marriage of the Lamb. And then afterwards, immediately or maybe a while afterwards, we read in chapter 19 that the church comes back together with Jesus Christ from heaven to the earth as part of his heavenly armies to defeat the Antichrist and his army. So can you see, during the period of tribulation that is described between chapter 6 all the way to chapter 18, the church is missing. The church is missing from during the period of tribulation. So the symbolism of John being caught up to heaven, pointing to pre-tribulation rapture, is not without merit. Okay, it's not without merit at all. Other than that, the rapture of the church is not mentioned at all in the book of Revelation. It is not explicitly mentioned at all in the book of Revelation. Now, as soon as Jesus commanded John to come up here, John was in the spirit and he was taken to heaven. We do not know whether John was actually in heaven or it was just a vision. You see, when the Apostle Paul was caught up into the third heaven, you know what Paul says? I don't know whether I was caught up in the body or out of the body. I have no idea at all. All Paul knew was that he had a marvelous spiritual experience. Okay, the in the spirit thing is something that I don't think in this side of eternity where we are, we can really understand that. It's interdimensional travel. If you put it scientifically, okay, caught up in the spirit and God begins to show John things. So John was, like I said earlier, John wasn't taken on the tour around heaven. He was ushered straight into the throne room of God. What a privilege to be taken into the throne room of God. What a privilege to be taken into the inner sanctum of God's abode. From verse 2 to the end of the chapter, there is only one focus. You know what is that focus? The throne of God. Go back and read the entire chapter again. The focus is on the throne of God. John tells us about the one seated on the throne. What is around the throne? What comes from the throne? What is before the throne? What is on the sides of the throne? And what is directed at the throne? Verse 2 to verse 11, that means the rest of chapter 1, after he was being caught up, the focus of the entire chapter was on the throne of God. When he was caught up, the first thing he saw was the throne of God. Revelation 4, verses 2 to 3. At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Now, the throne is not just a piece of furniture. You watch shows, about the medieval time, about ancient Chinese stories and all that. A throne, some can be elaborate, some can be simple, but the throne of God is not just a piece of furniture. It is a symbol of God's power and sovereignty over all the heavens and the earth. The throne is described as standing in heaven. Okay, I think this is important, an important symbolism. In Ezekiel chapter 1, you see the mobile throne of God, where the throne of God was just like constantly in motion, and the cherubim was moving with it. But here, when John saw the throne was fixed, it stood in heaven, it was standing in heaven, signifying that it was fixed, permanent, and unshakable. In other words, God's rule is absolute and eternal. God's rule is absolute and eternal. It is a comforting thought, considering the terrifying events of the last days, even if you and I don't have to go through the tribulation. You read the book of Tribulation, it can be pretty terrifying, okay? I don't want to be like certain people that say, oh no, see, look at the hope and all that. But truth be told, when you read it, okay, if you got to go through the 7 years, it is terrifying, okay? So it's comforting for the people in John's time reading this letter. God's throne is standing fixed there. God's throne is eternal. His control is absolute. God is sovereignly in control of everything. John saw a majestic figure seated on the throne. He couldn't see the face. I think the only prophet that got to see, in a way, anyway, is a vision, right? See the face of God, at least describe, is Daniel. Okay, is Daniel. The rest of the people, when they meet God, they couldn't see God. They could only see his form. Though John did not name the one sitting on the throne, it is obvious who he was. He was the one whom Isaiah saw. I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. He's the one whom the psalmist declare in Psalms 47 verse 8. God reigns over the nation. God sits on his holy throne. You realize that when throne is mentioned, it is always about the sovereign rule of God over the universe, over the earth, over the nations. It is about the reign, about the rule of God. John describes God as appearing like jasper and carnelian. That's quite a strange way of describing things, right? I know that Solomon also described his bride in a very, from the modern perspective, in an utterly bizarre way. Your neck is like the tower of, don't know what, Lebanon, but here, John simply cannot find the words to describe the beauty and the majesty of what he saw. And therefore, he said, it's like jasper, it's like carnelian. And if you know the Old Testament, jasper and carnelian are two of the 12 gemstones on the high priest, on the breastplate, on the high priest's chest area, the first and the last stone. Okay? And these are precious gemstones. Jasper is opaque and reddish in color. But in Revelation 21, we read the description of jasper as being transparent, crystal clear. Okay? Something is very interesting. It's like this, but it's not exactly like that. Carnelian also called sardius, is fiery red. So the thing is that John was just using this gemstone to describe the majesty, the beauty, and the glory of what he sees in the throne room. And when he saw God, that's how he described God. Then John saw a rainbow around the throne. He saw the person and he described the person on the throne, and then he began to move to what he saw around the throne. There was a rainbow. Rainbow symbolizes God's covenant faithfulness. You and I can trust in the covenant promises of God. Everything written in the Word is His covenant promise. There is a new covenant, there is an old covenant. Everything written inside will be fulfilled. God's promises cannot be broken. He's not a liar. Whatever He says, He will bring it to pass. Whatever He promised to us, He will keep His promise. Now, as described here, the rainbow has the appearance of an emerald, which is green in color. That's strange, right? How many colors does a rainbow have? 7. But then it says that the rainbow looks like an emerald, green color. Maybe green is a dominant color, I don't know. Okay? But you can tell, my point is this, you can tell by John's description that he was struggling very hard to describe what he saw. He was lost for words. From God's appearance to the colors, they were unlike anything that he has seen on the earth. And therefore, he was only trying his best. Okay? I can see that as he was writing this, like that, I don't know, maybe it's like a rainbow, and then the rainbow is like an emerald. Maybe it's like jasper, and then this jasper is crystal clear instead of reddish. So, he was struggling, and we can understand why. Okay? The throne room of God, heaven, is more beautiful than we think. It is not a boring place. Unrepentant sinners say that, look, I got a friend. This guy is a backslider, and he loved to throw jibes at Christians. And he told me before, he said, look, Leslie, I like to be in hell where there's disco, there's party. My generation, they talk about disco. There's party. In heaven, it's very boring. Now, let me tell you that heaven is not boring at all. Okay, the beauty will overwhelm you. The glory will overwhelm you. There is only one word to describe what John saw. Glory. Glory. It was glorious. God and His throne room were bathed in resplendent glory. Now let's move to the 4th verse, Revelation 4:4. And around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne were also 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments with golden crowns on their head. God's throne is not the only throne in heaven. There were 24 other thrones surrounding God's throne, on which were seated the 24 elders. Now God has promised overcomers and conquerors that we will rule and reign with Him. Meaning to say that He will put His children, the overcomers, on thrones to rule and reign together with Him. But here we got a picture of 24 elders, okay, that symbolize saints ruling together with Him. Who are the 24 elders? This question has been asked repeatedly by people. Who are the 24 elders? Now, the identity of the 24 elders has been the subject of many debates, unfortunately, without any consensus. Some claim that the 24 elders were divine beings, or as you might call it, angelic beings. But this is unlikely because in the Bible, angels are not given the title of an elder. And angels do not wear crowns. And angels do not sit on thrones. Nowhere in the Bible do you read of angels being associated with any of these things that I've just said. All right? There is, and besides, this is the victor's crown. The crown here is the victor's crown. We know that because the Greek word for crown is Stephanos, the victor's crown. Meaning to say, in that time, during athletic races and so on, the winner will get the Stephanos. The winner will get the victor's crown. Okay? So this is the victor's crown. Who did God promise the victor's crown to? Believers. All right? Like to the church in Smyrna, if you remember, Revelation 2, verse 10, second part of it, be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. And if you go back to the Greek word, it is the word Stephanos. There are many Greek words, several Greek words for crown, but the one given here is Stephanos. All right? So, we can confidently rule out the possibility that the 24 elders are angelic or divine beings. They are definitely human. Okay? I can tell you that confidently. Now, many scholars believe that the 24 elders are a representation of the church. 3 reasons that I will not elaborate. First, Christians are promised the victor's crown, which I've explained. Second, Christians are also promised to be clothed in white. And as you know, white symbolizes the imputed righteousness of Christ. And then third, Christians are also given the promise to rule and reign together with Christ. Reference to the throne. Okay? So they say that, well, the 24 elders should be referring to the church, a representation of the church of Jesus Christ. However, there are others who believe that the 24 elders comprise of the 12 patriarchs, the 12 sons of Israel, and the 12 apostles. Also makes sense, right? 24 ma, right? Always you got, in the Old Testament you got 12. That stands for government, and in the New Testament also 12 apostles. So they say that the 24 is most likely to imply that the church and Israel are represented here. Understand that in prophetic literature, Israel and the church are quite often, most of the time, treated differently as separate entities. So in this perspective, in this view, it seems also quite possible. Okay? Now, so there are good reasons as well as counterpoints to believe that the 24 elders are either a representation of the church or both the church and Israel. But we cannot be certain. Okay, I've read about these things, these arguments in detail. I can tell you that it is more complex than we think. You can pull out many different scriptures to prove the other side wrong. And therefore, this is one of those questions that I am very happy to leave it unanswered and say that we don't know. Okay, they are humans, they are not angels, but we don't know who the 24 elders are, right? So I'm sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer. Now let's go to verse 5 of Revelation 4. From the throne, okay, we have talked about around the throne. Now from the throne came flashes of lightning and rumbling and peals of thunder. It reminds me of what the Israelites saw when they were gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai. During the Exodus, they quaked with fear at the terrifying sight of God's presence and His display of raw power. Okay, we look at Exodus 20, verses 18 and 19. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountains smoking, the people were afraid and trembled. And they stood far off and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, lest we die." I mean, if God were to show His presence, His glory, in the way that He has shown the prophets and the apostles, I think we all will be terrified. And what's more, here the background is that of judgment. Okay, I'll talk about that later. What John saw was a threatening sight. Fires, lightning, and thunders are always associated with judgment. They are a precursor of the terrifying wrath of God that will be unleashed when the seals are opened and divine judgment are poured out on unrepentant and rebellious humanity. The throne room scene is quite similar to the one that Daniel saw in his vision. It is again All right? The scene is that of a courtroom. The scene is that of judgment. By the way, the scene that I'm going to describe right now, or rather I'm going to read right now, in Daniel's vision occurs later in the end time timeline. They are not the same, but similar, right? Daniel 7, 9 to 10, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Ancient of Days referred to the Heavenly Father. His clothing were white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And the court sat in judgment, and the books were open. So sometime all this symbolism of lightning, thunder, and rumbling convey to us the setting. Okay, God in chapter 4 of Revelation was getting ready to judge. His throne room will be turned into a courtroom whereby he will unleash judgments on the world. So after describing what came from the throne, John went on to describe what he saw before the throne. That means right in front of the throne. What did he see? Revelation 4, verses 5 and 6. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal. John explained that these 7 torches are symbol of the 7 spirits of God. Okay, remember we talked about this in the first or the second sermon. The 7 spirits of God is an allusion to Isaiah chapter 11, verse 2. Let me read that. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of God. This is the 7th Spirit of God. God has only one Spirit, okay, the Holy Spirit. But I think a better way to describe would be the 7-fold Spirit. Okay, but this is how it is described in the book of Revelation, the 7 spirits of God. All right? So take note that all these 7 qualities of the Holy Spirit are important, especially in the context of the end days. We need wisdom. We need understanding. We need knowledge. We need counsel. Counsel means the moment by moment revelation, insight, communication of God to us. Okay, the counsel. We need power and we need the fear of the Lord. No point knowing about all the things, but without the fear of God. We need the fear of God to be in our heart. Okay, there are several suggestions regarding the sea of glass. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, many different suggestions. I think this is the best explanation. The sea of glass is crystal clear, right? That's how John described it. It was crystal clear. I believe it indicates that before God, everything will be revealed. Nothing is hidden from God's sight. Everything will be uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of Him whom we must give an account. Make sense? Okay? The sea of crystal is before Him. It is crystal clear. God sees everything. God knows everything. Okay? In the context of Revelation, in the context of the whole idea of judgment, okay, I think this is the best explanation. Now we have observed that around the throne of God are 24 other thrones with 24 elders sitting on these thrones. This is the outer circle or the outer ring. John went on to describe what is in the inner circle, the inner ring. Okay? what do we find there? The 4 living creatures. The 4 living creatures. Revelation 4, verses 6 to 8. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The first living creatures like a lion, the second living creatures like an ox, the third living creature with the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and within. And day and night they never cease to say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and who is to come. Now these unique looking living creatures are a class of divine beings. I don't really like to use the word angelic being because angels connotes the idea of messenger. That's what angels are. But there are many other classes of divine beings, angels being one of them. So this is a certain class of divine beings. Apparently, from the description of their proximity to God, to God's throne, and their responsibilities, they belong to an exalted class of divine being. That means very high ranking. If not the highest ranking, they are very, very high ranking. The prophet Ezekiel identified these living creatures as cherubim. You know, there are seraphims whom Isaiah saw in chapter 6 of the book of Isaiah. This is different. Okay, described here as having 6 wings, but they are different creatures, different divine beings. Ezekiel specifically say that these 4 living creatures, he also saw the 4 living creatures. He identified them as cherubim. What do we think of their appearance? What do you think of their appearance? Okay, it looks a little bit, it sounds, the description is a bit like grotesque, right? They look a bit strange, not the usual thing that you will say beautiful, but you know what I think? I think if we get a chance to see them, I think they are beautiful and they are awesome looking. God cannot be just creating creatures around His throne that are awesome, that are awful looking, right? They got to be awesome. God is not insecure, right? I'm the most beautiful, most majestic. And the way to do it, you know how people are, right? They put around them not the best so that they stand out. God is not insecure. I believe that these living creatures are not pretty, they are beautiful, they are awesome, and they are also glorious. They have eyes all over them. I think it means something. So what does it mean? Now, while they are not omniscient, they are not all-knowing, they have powerful faculties of intelligence, understanding, wisdom, and they are alert. You have so many eyes, you cannot afford not to be alert, right? 50 eyes closed, there's still 50 eyes they are open. Please, I'm not suggesting that they have 100 eyes. The Bible never says that. Okay, they are alert. Now, Ezekiel also tells us that Lucifer is a cherub. By the way, cherub is singular. Cherubim is plural. Okay? So many cherub means, in Hebrew, I think it's a transliteration, is cherubim. All right? So Ezekiel tells us that Lucifer is a cherub. He was the anointed guardian cherub with responsibility around the throne of God. And Lucifer, by the way, you know who is Lucifer, right? After he has fallen, he's renamed Satan, all right? Satan, okay? If you got that initial, actually one of my elders got that initial. But here is Satan, all right? We're talking about different personality. And he was a worship leader in the throne room of God. A worship leader. And if you have read the description of Lucifer, musical instruments are built into him. Okay? So again, it looks very weird, but he is a worship leader in the throne room of God before pride got the better of him and he rebelled against God and God cast him out of heaven. After Adam and Eve rebelled against God, God placed cherubim to guard the way to the tree of life. If you remember that in Genesis, right? And then 2 golden cherubims were placed on each side of the mercy seat, the cover of the Ark of Covenant. Remember? And then in Solomon's temple, in the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies, there were 2 sculptured cherubim overlaid with gold. So there are mention of cherubims, some of them real life, some of them sculpted in the Bible. Now, in one of the most astounding visions recorded in the Bible, Ezekiel saw these same 4 living creatures surrounding the throne of God. Go back and read Ezekiel chapter 1. It is very fascinating. You know, when I first read it decades ago, you know what they look to me? Spaceships. I mean, really, but these are cherubims. Okay, these are cherubims. So, but there are differences. There are 3 differences. Although I believe that Ezekiel saw the same 4 cherubim, but the descriptions are a little bit different. These are the 3 differences. First, the throne and the cherubim were in constant motion in Ezekiel's vision, whereas in John's vision, the throne of God was fixed. All right? Second, the cherubim have 4 wings in Ezekiel's vision, whereas in John's vision, the cherubim have 6 wings. Third, each cherub has 4 phases. Each of the 4 cherub have 4 phases. One face like that of a man, one face like that of an eagle, one face like that of an ox, one face like that of a lion. Whereas in the vision that John saw, they have only one face. One of the cherub looks like a man, one looks like a lion, one looks like an eagle, and one looks like an ox. Now, so why did I say that these are the same 4 living cherubim, living creatures or cherubim? I say that because of perspective. They look at them from different vantage points. Okay, remember that when John looked at them, they were not moving. Okay, the throne of God was not moving. So maybe one of them show one face, the other one show another face, another one show another side of the face. And therefore, when John saw them like, okay, one looks like a man, one looks like an eagle, one looks like an ox, one looks like a lion. Whereas, in the vision of Ezekiel, all right, they were flying around, moving around at fast speed. And John saw that, Ezekiel saw that there are 4 different phases. Now back to the throne room of God. John saw the 4 cherubim around God and his throne, one on each side. I read that as in front of the throne, behind the throne, on the left of the throne, and on the right of the throne. Clearly, these cherubims are guardians of God's throne. They are like the bodyguards of God. Although God doesn't need any bodyguard, but they are like the bodyguards of God. Okay, so these are some of the interesting features and details about the cherubim. And as we read further in the book of Revelation, you will notice that these cherubims are directly involved in the judgment process. They are not just standing there and guarding. In Hokkien we say, pai sui, They are not there as a deco piece. They are involved in the judgment process. When the first 4 seals are open, the cherubims are barking orders. At their command, the judgments begin. Okay, you can read about this in Revelation chapter 6. Soon we are going to Revelation chapter 6. And then if you fast forward to Revelation chapter 15, you'll notice that the cherubims were once again involved in the judgment. They initiate the 3rd and the final series of judgments, the bowl judgment. We read in Revelation 15 verse 7, and one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. I'll make my last point as I conclude today's sermon. God is glorious. His throne room is glorious. Another glorious thing in the throne room of God is the worship that is directed towards God. Is the worship that is directed towards the throne of God. We read Revelations 4, verses 8 to 11 again. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes and around and within, and day and night, they never cease to say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to Him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before Him who is seated on the throne and worship Him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. Can you imagine? Day and night, they were praising God and worshiping God unceasingly. Not only them, the 24 elders, every time they hear, they got to get up from their throne, and then they will bow down and they will worship God. And I believe that there were other angels, other divine beings around, and they will all be doing exactly the same thing. The throne room of God is pulsating with the music of worship. The throne room of God is filled with praise, is filled with worship rendered unto the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now, many years ago, when I was younger, I heard a preacher commenting about this, and he said, if this is what is going to happen in eternity, well, it will be very boring. Now, he speak to us as a group of young people. He said, it seems like it's very, very boring. You got to keep getting up from your chair and then bow down, and then you sit down, and if one of the cherubim feel like it, he began to praise. You got to get up again, and he bow down. He said, I think this is really boring. And he wasn't joking, but he was strange. He's a good guy, but he was strange that he was saying that, all right, in the middle of whatever that he was preaching and teaching. But you know what I think? I beg to differ. The beauty and the wisdom and the power and the riches and the holiness and the glory of God will be so overwhelming, and it will be so compelling that even in our redeemed and glorified body, we just cannot help but we will want to worship Him. We will desire to worship Him, and that's what we will do in eternity. Now, and having said that, I don't think we'll be in the throne room all the time. I don't think we'll be floating around playing the harp. Okay, most of us cannot play the harp. Many of you can play the guitar or the guitar. I think there'll be other things to do. There will be many meaningful activities. In my sanctified imagination, I believe that God has many other creations, many other beings in His universe, and you and I will be sent to be kings and priests, rulers in these various planets or realm. There'll be things to do. But despite being posted into all the different far-flung places in the universe, our hearts will long to worship God. Our heart will long to go back to the throne room of God, into His presence, and to worship Him. Our hearts will be aching and longing and desiring to worship God, because that will be the most beautiful thing that we do in heaven. It will not be boring. It will be a tremendous and glorious experience. Amen? So right now I'd like to invite every one of us to stand.